repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Thanks for showing up. I think it's, as always, I plan my, whatever I'm going to say, like 3 seconds ago as I'm doing my offering. But I think it's important to find inspiration on your spiritual path. And it's something that, within Buddhism, if I think about it long enough, and maybe by the end of the short time we're here, I can tie it into some like actual thing that has a Buddhist name to it. But inspiration is important because without that inspiration, without that drive, without that motivation, and this is really the Buddhist teachings on diligence and effort, you give up. And it's not just with Buddhist practice or meditation or whatever spiritual journey you're on, but really with everything in life. If we don't have inspiration, if we don't have motivation, if we don't have something that drives us, we might give up. Or I should say it's harder to keep going. And very often and I know at least for me, the motivation, the inspiration from the beginning was, I'm just sick of being angry and depressed and miserable, right? But for me, the motivation should become more than that. I don't know that the healthiest thing is to have the motivation and inspiration come from only this like negative place of anger and hatred and rage. I mean, that's where a lot of us come from, whatever those emotions are for you. But I think having a positive inspiration, a positive motivation is important. And what made me think of this is two things really, but as I was doing the offerings and as is almost always in my mind is Venerable Yijur, my first teacher that I met 20 years ago at the Buddhist temple down the street. And I still remember the first night I went to temple and the first night I met her. And I still remember our first conversation and her following up with an email to check on me. And, actually, she probably knew. I was going to say, little did she know that would all lead to this. But I'm pretty convinced after knowing her for 20 years, she knew exactly what she was doing. I was the idiot who didn't know. But she always inspired me. She was my inspiration from the beginning. The anger, the hatred, the rage, the anxiety, or the depression, that was there. But she inspired me because she just had such a peaceful way about her that to this day, I still think, wow, how did she do that? And over the years, people around here, being that she was down the street from the temple for 12 years, got to know her. And she was so amazing because you would show up and you would sit down and tell her like all your life's problems as if she was going to give you some grand Buddhist answer. And she looked at you and smiled and she just sang some pretty little song in Mandarin, which meant you didn't understand it unless you spoke Mandarin Chinese. And then all of a sudden, with that little song in her voice, all your problems were gone. And all of us were just so amazed. And some people would say, well, you're not learning Buddhism. Really? Why? Because she didn't say fancy words that made us sound smart? She just took away all the pain, all the trouble, all the worries simply by smiling and singing a song. And so to this day, she still really just inspires me and motivates me. And I think I bring her up for, well, many reasons. One, she's always on my mind, always on my heart. But really, for you to explore who in your life is your inspiration, who motivates you, who pushes you to become the best version of yourself that you can be. Because having these people in your life is incredibly important. And whether it's somebody you know, whether it's somebody you love dearly, whether it's somebody that drives you absolutely crazy, which is also possible, or whether it's a stranger, it doesn't matter. But I think it's important to find people in your lives that do that for you. And, the second thing for me, as far as a motivation, inspiration, and I started doing this during when the pandemic hit, and then shortly thereafter, and still continue to this day. And now it has even more heavier meanings to it. Heavier is not the right word, but still the heaviness is still there. I started, when I do my offerings, I started turning to the medicine Buddha. And this tanka here is for health and healing. And so those crazy Buddhists who are like into rituals and the religious side of things and faith and all that stuff actually pray to the medicine Buddha for all beings to be healthy, for all beings to be free from pain, free from disease, free from sickness. And so when the pandemic hit, and it became this like such a powerful thing. And in many ways, it's still with us, because there are still people in this room whose lives were forever shattered and altered from the pandemic. And with everything going on in the world today in the Middle East, there's just so much heaviness. And that heaviness is never going to go away, as I've been talking about a lot recently. It's just going to change. It'll change forms. It was the pandemic. It is the pandemic. It's what's happening in the Middle East. 6 months, 5 years, 20 years from now, it'll be something else. And I don't mean that to minimize the seriousness of what's going on. I say that to the reality that there's always going to be these heavy, heavy things in our lives that cause tremendous pain. And for me, that's the second motivation and inspiration, is how can this path really impact my life? But then recognizing I'm just some dude floating through. I'll be dead and gone like that. And what did I do? What did we do while we're here to make things hopefully better for those who follow? So that's my inspiration. That's what motivates me. And hopefully you'll find, if you don't have that inspiration, hopefully you'll find it. Because I think it's really critical, especially when you're having a rough time in your life. Make it not about you. Make it about someone else, and life gets easier. So with that, we'll go ahead and start with the meditation practice. And to those joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Feel free to say hello. There's a chat box on your screen somewhere. So a couple things to tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. All right? You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, often it helps. Sliding to the front third, pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, just trying to sit up straight. Also relaxing the shoulders, hands are on the knees or lap, whatever's comfortable for you. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means your leg hurts or you have to move. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting. Breathing. Learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, just sitting, breathing. And when the body's still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And when ready, slowly opening the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit, hold the hands, across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us, or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not always fun. It's not an escape. It's direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment is filled with chaos, difficulty, challenges. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation isn't going to fix that. It helps you become aware of why your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess so you can then make changes in your life. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter. And that's all. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets simpler. But it's not easy. And so we come together to sit, practice, be challenged to take an honest, genuine look at the one thing that's causing all the suffering in your lives. And that's your own mind. And very rarely do people want to actually sit with their own mind, because it seems like torture. No matter where you run to, no matter how fast you run, no matter where you go, no matter where you are, your mind is there. So the sooner you learn to be with that mind, embrace it, accept it, and learn to like it, the sooner you'll find a sense of happiness in each moment. And then all the miserable things going on in the world will still be there, but you'll be able to work to create change coming from a place of kindness and compassion, and not from a place of anger and hatred. Because when the world is filled with anger and hatred, the last thing it needs is more people who are angry and having hatred. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for questions. Again, to those who are joining virtually, good morning, welcome. Feel free to say hello. There's a chat box on your screen somewhere. And if you have any questions, you can put them there. I'll do my best to respond as well. So, well, that was quick. Go ahead.
I have a question. what I've read, which is not a lot, but we talk about dukkha and suffering, and we talk about impermanence, Nietzsche, correct? Holly. But really, I'm trying to understand the concept of anatta or anatta. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. And what is dharma? Just to be honest, I mean, as a new, someone who's in and out of this, I just really want to know what is your definition or what your
of dharma.
Dharma and anatta.
You mean
Is it
atman, non-self?
Is it non-self? I know dukkha, Nietzsche, and
Non-self.
non-self.
Yeah, nirvana, non-self, and impermanence.
Is it?
They refer to them as the three dharma seals. I'm not your Pali expert, man. But the three dharma seals: nirvana, non-self, and impermanence. But let me start with dharma because that one I think is I'll just start with dharma. So even at the beginning, when we take refuge, right, we do the offering, I do the offering, and you either have your palms joined or you're staring out the window, and whatever you do is totally up to you. I have no bearing on me. But when I do the offering at the beginning, we take refuge in the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, right? Refuge, safety, comfort, protection, shelter, whatever the word refuge means. The Buddha, we're not taking refuge in the Buddha himself. He died 2,500 years ago. He cannot help you right now, my friends. You are on your own, so good luck. But we take refuge in what's called bodhicitta, which is Buddha nature, that we all have the same faculties and ability to awaken as Siddhartha did, right? We're human, we're alive, we're breathing. Maybe we'll eat today, maybe we'll go to the bathroom today, maybe we'll walk today, maybe we'll go outside today, maybe who knows what we'll do today. But same stuff the Buddha did, and he awakened. So we find safety, comfort, protection in the fact that we too can figure out how to end our suffering. I don't wake up each day and think like, oh, is today the day? Am I going to awaken today? I'm convinced the answer to that is absolutely not. But I know that I can suffer less today than I did yesterday. I know that I can be kinder, gentler today than I was yesterday. So that's the practice. And that's what taking refuge in bodhicitta, right? That's what it means. To have that true belief that you yourself can minimize, reduce, and ultimately end your suffering. So the second one is the Dharma. And the Dharma often referred to in two ways, kind of technical Buddhist stuff. You'll hear like capital D Dharma, which is all phenomena. But let's forget about that for a minute because that one's a little bit hard to discuss. But it's all phenomena occurring at all times, in all space, in all directions. That's Dharma. But practically, Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha. So everything we talk about, nirvana, no self, impermanence, Four Noble Truths, Eightfold Paths, Six Paramitas, all those things that you read about and all the lists and numbers and keywords and all these different languages and everything we discuss, those are the teachings of the Buddha. And that's what Dharma actually is. The word Dharma often most closely translates to the word truth, but it's not, this is important, it's not truth as spoken by the Buddha. That would make him sound like he was some god who like gave you this ultimate truth. What the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma is actually supposed to do, and what it's designed to do is to help us see ultimate truth, ultimate reality. What do we actually see all day long? What do we see? A reflection of what? Y'all whispered that at the same time, so I have no idea what you said. But we come from our own perceptions. Is your perception of reality truth? No. It's just your perception of reality. It's what you're living with, it's what you're working with, it's what you got. It doesn't mean you're going to abandon it. But every argument, every fight, every conflict, every war, every struggle is because two sides, two people, two places, two countries, two whatever, have different perceptions of the truth. And then we cling to those perceptions and we defend them and we try to prove them. And we want to show people that our truth is right. Been in an argument recently, Summer?
Have I? Okay.
Yeah, it's a safe bet asking you that question, Summer. And in that argument, did you think you were right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely 100%. And what do you think the other person thought?
Well, they're nuts, but.
They're nuts. So I knew that also, right? But in them being nuts, they also probably thought they were right. And so there you have the argument. And maybe at times, anyone in here ever been in an argument and realized you were wrong? And then you're like, oh yeah, but wait, I'm going to argue anyways because I just want to win the argument. I'm still wrong, but at least I can win the argument, right? That was half of my life. And so in these attachments to our ego, our self, our pride, our stories, we're nowhere near the ultimate truth. We're just stuck in our perception of reality. And we spend our entire lives here. And you wonder why people are so miserable. Because we roam around thinking that we're actually right. This is a hard one to learn early on, especially if you think you're always right. Because it really forces you to kind of shatter this idea that maybe you're not right. And forget about right or wrong for a minute. Just look at this from a spiritual practice, from meditation, Buddhist path. Forget about right or wrong. All you have to do is ask yourself, am I actually truly happy every day? And if you're not, then the way you're living your life should change. So it's not about right or wrong, but it's the perception and reality that if you're not happy every day, if you don't find gratitude, appreciation, and joy, then something about your perception should change if you want to find happiness. And ultimately, you don't find happiness, you are happiness. You got to stop searching for it. That's the first thing. So Dharma, ultimate truth, teachings of the Buddha. Non-self really is, without getting too far into it, to understand that in a similar way of everything I just talked about, that we have these perceptions of ourselves. Take everything I just said and apply it to yourself. If 10 people stand there and describe summer, they're going to describe you all the same way? No. Now you give your description of yourself, also different. Who's right? Who's wrong? These are just our perceptions. So all these perceptions we have of everybody else in the world, we also have towards ourselves. All our stories we're stuck on, all the processing we're doing, all the things we're telling people about ourselves, those are all just stories. Non-self is to understand that you are a human going through this crazy existence, having experiences. You are here, you exist, you just exist completely differently from how you perceive yourself. And oh, by the way, most people see themselves as the most important people in the world. Hate to break it to you, but I'm always honored to sit with a room full of people who are all the most important people in the world, myself included. So it's a joy for us all to gather on a Saturday morning. So I hope that helps. Other questions?
How does a new person start? Like, what is the path for someone that's new and kind of like investigate more? You come to these on Saturdays, I'm guessing. What else would be good to kind of layer into that as a beginning?
Sitting right there. That's where it starts. The challenge is, and I've heard that question a million times. So I will tell you and suggest probably what you shouldn't do as opposed to what you should do. Do your best to not think that Buddhism is something you must conquer or attack. I don't mean that in a negative way, but like aggressively go after. Do your best to not think that there are goals, or that you must get better at it, or that you must accomplish something or achieve something or win. For me, Buddhist practice was incredibly beautiful because I finally met something that wasn't about winning. It was about every single day recognizing my own level of greed. These are the 3 poisons in Buddhism. Right? Second noble truth, the cause of our suffering. Every single day, right? What's your name?
Brian.
Say again?
Brian.
Brian. Every single day, recognize Brian's levels of greed, levels of anger, and levels of ignorance. And if you never go to another Buddhist place again, ever, and you never pick up another Buddhist book again, and you spend every day for the next 5 years honestly reflecting on your greed, your anger, and your ignorance, you will be practicing deeper than most people who spend all their lives going to a Buddhist place. And I mean that very seriously. I understand the beautiful, simple question. I'm just not the guy who's going to say, well, show up Wednesday at 7 o'clock and that's what's next. You'll figure that shit out on your own. So I do think that, kind of completing, I talked about the taking refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, right? The third one is the Sangha, and that's the community. And there's like probably 75 Buddhist temples within a 20-mile radius of here. I don't care where you go. I don't care if you come here, there, or sit at home on your couch. But it is important to find people and places that you feel comfortable with to practice, to explore honestly. Because sometimes being honest with ourselves about our own levels of greed, anger, and ignorance can involve a lot of greed, anger, and ignorance, right? Because we're using our own angry, ignorant mind to assess and evaluate our own level of greed, anger, and ignorance. I'm not greedy. I'm not angry. I'm not ignorant. Done. Right? Back to cartoons. So I think finding people and places and, even just the nature of Dharma Bum Temple. Is this first time here? Brand new? A couple times? First time here. We built this 17 years ago to introduce Buddhism from all different lineages and schools of Buddhist practice. And as I always say at the end, those of us who leave, we're not monks or nuns or masters or teachers or anything like that. We all introduce the practice from a different perspective. So even here, in the nature of the way our schedule is built, every single day we have somebody else up here, just as unenlightened as I am, doing their best to share their approach to Buddhist practice. And some of them, you'll be like, yes, I really like that person. And some of them, you'll be like, I don't like them at all. That's the person you should sit with. Right? But, finding places and people you're comfortable with and around and can learn. And other than that is the obvious. Yeah, you just keep showing up whenever you show up. You pick up some books here and there and you read some stuff. And there's all those practical things. But the reason I started with things you shouldn't do is I always caution new people to bring, my master used to always talk about how to study Buddhism. Don't bring, it's that Einstein quote, you can't solve the world's problems with the same mind that created it, right? So something led Brian here on a Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, and it probably wasn't because everything is perfect and peaceful in your life, right? So all that mind that you've used to create whatever is going on in your life, that's not the mind you want to bring into Buddhist practice. That's the mind you want to work at shattering and cutting through. And that takes some time. So hopefully that's helpful. Yeah, sure. What else?
Forgiveness and letting go.
Forgiveness and letting go. That's it. Thank you for your teaching this morning. Anything else? Next question. Are you having a difficult time with those things?
I was until I let go.
Yeah. And how did it feel when you let go?
Invigorating. Yeah. It felt wonderful. I felt like freedom.
Freedom.
Finally. Yeah.
Yeah. How long were you holding on to what you finally let go of?
About 3 months.
3 months.
So.
That's beautiful. How many in this room have been holding on to things for 30 years?
I have two.
Well, yes. Say that again, louder.
I have two.
Oh, you have. So you let go of one thing in 3 months. That's phenomenal. But you still got something you hold on to for 30 years.
Now that-
How? Go ahead. Sorry.
Now that I've let go of what's been going on the past 3 or 4 months, it's enlightened me to see that, okay, now I can go further and deeper and maybe move this other junk forward.
Amazing. And isn't it, I mean, I'm kind of repeating what you just said, but very inspiring and motivating to know that you can actually let things go that you've been carrying around that deeply hurt you. And if you can do it with one thing that was recent, just 3 months, those wounds, physically, mentally, emotionally, that are very recent, those are raw. And those are often, even though we might think that, oh, we've been holding on to something for 30 years, so it's harder to let go of it, but that pain was 30 years ago. And very often in situations like that, what we're actually holding on to isn't even the thing anymore, it's just the story we've been telling ourselves for 30 years. And we've conditioned, in Buddhism we call this, this conditioning, we condition our minds, not even necessarily about the thing anymore, but like I said, we've conditioned ourselves to believe and feel the story we have told 1,000,000 times over 30 years. Yet in 3 months, you took something that was so painful and shattering, and you were able to let it go. My guess is you practiced what? To let it go. What was the other thing you said at the beginning? You said 2 words.
Forgiveness.
And did you use forgiveness to let go of what you've been holding on to for the last 3 months?
Yes, and I forgot about the forgiveness part. Because I was so angry and upset, and I forgot to forgive.
And forgiveness is, and again, I'm just repeating what you said, but forgiving is liberating. It is freedom. And very often what we're holding on to for 30 years also requires forgiveness. Unfortunately, I don't know if unfortunate is the right word, but the reality is very often when someone or something hurt us 3 months ago, that person or whatever it might be is very present in our lives. And so we have maybe a more actual opportunity to practice forgiveness because there they are in our lives. If someone or something hurt us 30 years ago, it makes forgiveness seemingly very difficult to do. Because maybe they're not in our lives anymore. Maybe they were only in our lives for, one moment or a brief moment. Maybe we don't know them. I think the most important thing for forgiveness is to understand that forgiveness isn't about the other person. Forgiveness is for you. Forgiveness also doesn't mean that what they did, for example, is right, or correct, or okay, or healthy, or good, or appropriate, or anything. They did what they did because they were coming from their tremendous pain and suffering. That's not an excuse. That doesn't correct it. That doesn't make it okay. It's understanding why people do things that cause harm because of their pain, their ignorance, their suffering. That's what causes us to create harm in others, or to do things that create others to feel harm. So when we have those situations in our lives, as hard as it may be to do, what we actually need to do to overcome that pain and suffering that we're feeling is to forgive them. You don't need to hug them. You don't need to thank them. You don't need to love them. You don't need to feel what they did was right. But you forgiving them is so your heart can open and feel free. And that's also very difficult to do. But living with pain all these years, we torture ourselves. So what someone or something did or occurred once, one moment in our life, we then spend the next 30 years torturing ourselves. And we don't need to make it 31 years. So I'm glad you were able to let go and forgive and heal from recent wounds. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
Sorry, another question. What is the meaning of the Buddha behind you, where there's like a very healthy looking Buddha, and then there's a very thin, emaciated looking?
The hungry one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the emaciated Buddha, as you said. And first off, the one in the middle, the large one, is Kuan Yin. So I'll tell the emaciated Buddha story in a minute, but Kuan Yin is the Bodhisattva of compassion. Her name literally means hearer of the world's cries. The Dalai Lama, they say, in Tibetan Buddhism, and just throughout Buddhism in general, very often they say that the Dalai Lama is the literal reincarnation or rebirth of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin, the endless body of compassion. She hears all the suffering in the world, is often seen holding or pouring out a vase, and that is the vase of compassion. So she hears the suffering, again, hearer of the world's cries. She hears the suffering and then pours out compassion to heal, right? When we moved here from downtown, and then I'll get to the emaciated Buddha in a minute, but we were approached maybe a year in and asked about completing the shrine the way we felt was proper and appropriate for the space we were in. And we felt nothing better than to put a Kuan Yin Bodhisattva, the female body of compassion, as our main shrine centerpiece, because we felt what this temple, what this city, what the world needed was a stronger female presence and compassion. And with that, maybe there's hope for us, right? And so then below that, you have the emaciated Buddha. And for those who don't know the story, and I actually haven't told it in a while, but this is Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha on his journey. And very quick, for those who don't know the life story of the Buddha, for those who may be brand new, the Buddha wasn't some big belly dude floating in the sky, right? Wasn't a god, he was just some dude. He was a prince, had all the wealth, all the riches, all the everything in the world that you could imagine. 29 years old, he leaves home and he sees old age, sickness, and death, and an ascetic, like a nun or a monk, a wise, simple person. And he goes back to his buddy and he's like, Chana, what's with old age, sickness, and death? Does that happen to all of us? He's like, yeah, we all age, we all get sick, we all die. And his father sheltered him because when he was born, they said he would either become a great king, ruler, or like a great sage. And the father's like, no, I want him to be king. So they never let him see old age, sickness, or death. He never saw any of it. Sneaks out, comes back to his buddy. Chana says, yes, my lord, that happens to all of us. And in essence, he turns to his buddy and says, well, I'm out of here. I can't live in a life with wealth and riches when I know there's a world out there that's suffering. So he leaves home. He roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. And as a yogi at that time in India, as a Hindu, part of their practice was they believed that if they overcame the attachment to physical form, they could awaken. So it's said that they lived on 1 grain of rice a day, nearly starved themselves. They would do practices like standing on one leg for months at a time, hanging from a tree for months at a time or weeks at a time, really to kind of really stretch their ability to challenge the physical form of the body. And so eating 1 grain of rice a day got pretty skinny. They said you could take your fingers, push them front to back, and they would actually touch through his skin, right? So they came to a riverbed, and there was a woman there with some food, offered them and his buddies food. And they all were like, no, we're not eating. And Siddhartha said, in essence, I'm hungry. So he took the bowl and he said, I'm going to set it in the stream. And if it goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. Bowl goes against the stream. All his buddies are mad. They're like, you're a sellout, you're a traitor, I'm a food eater, all this stuff. And they left him. And Siddhartha went on his way, right? And after 6 years, he sits at the base of the Himalayan mountains and 21 days doesn't move underneath the Bodhi tree. And in Bodh Gaya, India, you can go see it today. and he had what they called the awakening, right? And they called him the Buddha. Buddha just means awaken. But at that moment, when he began to eat, he started to practice in what became known as the teaching of the middle path. And that we often in our lives live in extremes. Extreme one way or the other. And I'll wrap up here with this thought, but extremes, the middle path is different for different people. Maybe you have 100 shirts. Maybe you could survive with just 50. Maybe you have 30 pairs of shoes. Maybe you could survive with just 15. Maybe you spend $30 on a meal. Maybe you could spend 15. And with that extra money or food or clothes or whatever it is, you could help somebody who's got nothing. Your balance, your middle path is different. And this goes not just with physical things, with mental and emotional stuff as well. Right? So finding balance is important. When we chose this Buddha, when we opened the temple end of 2006, so 17 years ago when we started, we picked this Buddha because it was us. At this moment in his life, wasn't the Buddha yet, he was Siddhartha, the emaciated, they call it the emaciated Buddha, but he was Siddhartha Gautama. Just some dude, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually near death. And when we started the temple, that was pretty much us. We were just some people physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually near death. And if we didn't figure it out, it wasn't going to get any better. So when we opened the temple, instead of picking this like awakened Buddha or anything like that, we wanted a Buddha that represented who we were. We sat with Siddhartha as a reflection of us, struggling people, trying to find our way, as opposed to this enlightened Buddha that we're trying to become. Because for us as Dharma bums, it was really all about being honest with greed, anger, and ignorance. Like, let's be honest. Let's not get wrapped up in the Buddhist trappings of nirvana and enlightenment and fancy words and different cultures and monks and nuns and bowing and chanting and robe. Those are all beautiful practices. I'm not minimizing that. But let's focus on our greed, our anger, our ignorance, and what's causing our suffering. Because that's on us. And as much as we'd love to spend the rest of our lives blaming other people for all of our pain and misery, we must let that go if we want to awaken or if we want to just be happy. So that's the emaciated Buddha. Represents balance, middle path, and I think an honest reflection of where we're at. So, yeah. And I love when we set this up. It's a whole another long story for another day, but when we put the statue in Kuan Yin pour in the vase, to me it always looks like he's pouring compassion down on the emaciated Buddha because it's what he needed at that time. So, all right, so with that, we'll close. There's a question here that says, I've tended to think of religion as dualistic, you're saved or you're not. Some seems so different, more of a process. Is this accurate? Yeah, in the interest of time and wanting to wrap up here. Yeah, Buddhism is not about you're saved or you're not. Buddhism is you're on your own. And you can either be happy or miserable, and that's up to you. Buddha won't save you. He's not going to fix you. He's not going to heal you. And as I said earlier, he died. And we are, with every breath, one moment closer to death. So try to find a path that's healthy and happy for you and does less harm to self and others, and you'll be good to go. And the next time we can talk about Buddhism as a religion and a philosophy, because it really is truly both. Depends on how you see it. So, all right, so we'll join palms. And the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit came from this practice be transferred to Molly's mother during her time of rebirth, and to Molly and her family who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who leave, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Just about every night, as I alluded to earlier, different people leading different practices from different Buddhist traditions. Every Thursday, 5 o'clock, we do, I think, still probably the best thing around here, we do a food redistribution program. We prepare gourmet, vegetarian, peanut butter and jelly meals for people who sleep on the streets every night. So anytime you think your life sucks and you lack gratitude and appreciation for all you have, go feed people sleeping on the sidewalk. It tends to put things in perspective. So that's every Thursday, 5 o'clock. Other than that, yeah, always something going on. If anybody wants to stick around after, as always, we have our kind of gardening, temple clean time. There's a list, we moved it, it's inside the bathroom now. Tasks to help clean up around the temple if you want to stay. If you want to garden, pick up leaves, whatever it is outside, you can always use the help. So we have no cleaning crew, we are the cleaning crew. So feel free to help out and take care of the temple that takes care of us. So Buddha Few is there if you need anything. And thanks all, enjoy your day.